What's going on, draft fans? Welcome back. Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I'm your host, Russell Brown. First time in a long time. Not much has really changed, though. New year, same old me, doing the NFL Draft stuff for us here over at cover1.net. And jumping in, and now that we're basically getting the draft order under control across the NFL, Jacksonville, Detroit battling it out for the first pick or the second pick. That's going to be confirmed after this upcoming weekend, week 18 of the NFL. Crazy to think we're basically into the playoffs now, but the rest will sort itself out. We'll kind of have the draft order for the top 20 teams or so, top 18 teams, whatever it is that makes into the playoffs, and we'll start diving in there. But now that we're into the new year, now that the college football season is essentially over, there's one game left, and that's the national championship game between Georgia and Alabama. Now that we're in the thick and thin of this, or into the thick of this, we'll be doing probably 3 episodes a week, definitely 2. Specifically audio shows, and then we'll mix in a video show on YouTube. Maybe we'll do one audio show here and there with a video show, because 3 might be a little hectic at times. But we're into this thing, so we're going to be bringing on players to talk to and walk through their journey. We're going to bring in other draft analysts that I respect across the business and the industry to talk a little football with me. We'll bring on team reporters and things like that, talk about the landscape of specific teams, the whole nine, like we normally do right here on Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. So if you have not done so yet, and you want to stay on top of this, you need to find the podcast by searching Cover One in your browser from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, YouTube, whatever you do, and add us into your rotation. Subscribe to the show, drop us a rating, download it, the whole nine, but drop us a rating for sure. Leave a comment in there, and if you do, maybe here down the line, I'll pick a couple at random for some Cover One gear and things like that, maybe even a year subscription to us over at cover1.net. So check it out. But lots to get into today. Senior Bowl reveal show happened today. I want to talk about that briefly. I want to talk about some breaking news that has happened within the last hour or so in regards to Jim Harbaugh. And then I want to talk about some players opting out and the importance I think that it is for opting out. And I'm sure I'm going to, ruffle some feathers and things like that. That's fine. I don't care. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to talk football and talk logically. So with that being said, let's just jump into this breaking news of Jim Harbaugh, because it's fresh. It happened within the last hour and a half, maybe 2 hours now. Bruce Feldman, at Bruce Feldman CFB on Twitter, says he drops an article over on The Athletic as well with it, so you can check that out. Sources from both the NFL side and at Michigan tell The Athletic that Jim Harbaugh might be tempted to leave the Wolverines to return to the NFL. The 2 teams that have been somewhat on the rumor mill, and the teams that it sounds like he's most interested in, would be the Chicago Bears, which is where he played in the NFL for a little bit, and then the other one would be the Las Vegas Raiders. So there's definitely something there, and on my drive home, I was listening to local radio here in Detroit, sports radio, and there was a conversation about Matt Rule possibly being on the hot seat in Carolina. Could he be a potential replacement at Michigan for Jim Harbaugh if he jumps to the NFL? So now, I'm not reporting something of the nature of, average Joe on Twitter that has 15 followers. I mean, Bruce Feldman is connected. He does a tremendous job on The Athletic. He does a tremendous job on the college football front. And the fact that he's reporting this, I think there's definitely a lot of substance behind it. But also, as we know, the old saying goes, if there's smoke, there's probably fire. So I think after what we saw at the college football playoff game against Georgia was a little bit unexpected. Me as a betting man, caught me off guard, cost me a couple of bucks. But beyond that, he struggled against Ohio State, got it done this past year, got it done. But can he continue that success? He's struggled against Michigan State. He's 3-4 against them. So ultimately, has he had enough? Is he ready just to get back to the NFL? Is he tired of, between COVID and the traveling of having to get all these recruits and battling with Ohio State and just making it to the college football playoff and seeing the difference? Has he just maybe realized, I need to go back to the NFL where I can compete, potentially win now, and really take advantage of my window as a head football coach. Very possible. But also money talks, right? Money is one of those things. If the Raiders are going to come in with, I don't want to say $100 million deal like they did with John Gruden, but if they do, if the Bears come out and they want to spend a little coin because they've got a new stadium coming down the road in the future, I know it's going to be a little bit of time, but they've got a young player like Justin Fields, they've got some young defensive players like Jalen Johnson, and Thomas Graham has stepped in very well. Is it enough to maybe say, hey, we want to bring this guy in and we want to win with him? There's so many different options. But beyond that, remember, Jim Harbaugh went from being one of the highest paid coaches in college football to the 32nd ranked paid coach in college football. They reworked his deal after last year, and now he comes out, he wins the Big Ten, he proves himself, he goes to the the college football playoff, and here we are. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. They've had a month to really put a deal together because you win the Big Ten. You would think, hey, you know what? We might have cut $2 to $3 million off your deal. You've earned that money back. Here you go. So we're going to see. We're going to see if this is a mutual thing between him and Michigan. Maybe they just part ways and he goes back to the NFL and Michigan finds somebody else that can go 3-4 for a hell of a lot cheaper against Michigan State as an in-state rival, or potentially just one win over a 7-year span against Ohio State, their biggest rival. So we'll see how it goes. Jim Harbaugh, though, to the NFL would definitely be a big move for whatever team grabs him. It'd be a big move on Michigan's part to part ways with him, but also from an NFL draft perspective, I mean, you would have to think between now and maybe within the next week or so, we could see even more players opt into the NFL draft from the University of Michigan. We saw David Ojabo jump in this morning. He went pro. He declared for the 2022 NFL draft. We all assume Aiden Hutchinson could be the first pick. We know he'll be in the draft, though. Could we see a couple of other players? Very possible. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be fun, and I say that with somewhat of a smirk on my face as a Michigan State fan and alum. But beyond that, no, I mean, it's breaking news. There's definitely some substance behind it, and it's worth monitoring. So getting into the draft side of things, Senior Bowl reveal show, tons of great stuff by Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl executive director, and NFL Network's Bucky Brooks, Daniel Jeremiah, and Rhett Lewis of the Move the Sticks podcast. They did a phenomenal job revealing these rosters and getting us up to date of what we need to know. Between the two 55-man rosters that are being built, these rosters are being built by regional scouts that work under Jim Nagy in the Senior Bowl, and they take week-long opportunities to evaluate multiple talented players from across the country as they travel all year long, and they find these guys, and these rosters are really shaping up to be something really impressive. I want to skip a specific group because we're going to kind of end there, but I will jump right into the running backs. Let me just say Brian Robinson Jr., and again, I'm not going to hit every single player here because, I mean, we're talking 255-man rosters. I don't have time to go through, 110 players, but Brian Robinson Jr. from Alabama, maybe the cream of the crop, I think, of this running back group for this Senior Bowl group right now. Don't get me wrong, I'm very intrigued with Damien Pierce, Abram Smith as well, but, and Hassan Haskins and James Cook from Georgia. But I just think with what I've seen from Brian Robinson, the ability that he has from a lateral cut ability, how well he's able to just dice up defenders in those short areas, it's impressive. And he's somebody that I think has really good burst when he's getting into the second level. I think there's definitely times that, once he starts picking up momentum, he's a better runner. He's a lot better of a running back. But what you just see from how he attacks the hole, how he attacks upfield and goes, left to right, his ability to change direction on a dime, on a snap of a finger, is impressive. So Brian Robinson Jr. could be very, very beneficial with a strong week in Mobile. Rachaad White from Arizona State is maybe the smoothest runner, something that has been even said and quoted by Jim Nagy, but he's just a smooth operator, man. Like when you think about a car that needs that, the car that needs the oil. It gets the fresh paint job, the fresh oil change. All the cylinders are clicking and everything. It's like a brand new Cadillac. That's what, Rachaad White is out of Arizona State. So he's smooth, man. I think he could have a really strong week at the Senior Bowl as well. Probably one of those guys that, like I just said, gets overlooked because of a player like Brian Robinson, who absolutely torched Cincinnati for over 200 yards rushing, which I kind of figured he was going to have a big day, but whatever. And he ends up doing that. But White could be one of those guys that really comes out and impresses. Abram Smith, former linebacker turned running back, interesting player because he's somebody that runs so hard. He is just somebody that is physical, downhill, gets after it, and Smith is somebody that if he can come out, catch some passes out of the backfield during this week of practice, maybe has some wide receiver reps, shows that he's reliable on third down, picking up blitzes, which I think he can do all of these things. If it all checks out, he's going to be a draftable player. Could we see him in the top 100? Very possible. Could he be one of the first backs off the board? Very possible. Do I prefer, somebody like a Kenneth Walker? Yes, but I also like, Breece Hall a little bit and Isaiah Spiller. So it's tough to say where Smith falls, but to become that draftable player, to be guarantee yourself, hey, I'm a second day guy, I'm a second round pick. Smith could very well do that. Damien Pierce from Florida, another one, runs very hard. Just somebody that loves contact. I love his running style. I think he got very overlooked in a bad Florida offense, a very bad Florida team. So I think he could have a very beneficial week. We've seen it with other guys. LaMichael P. Ryan had a good week at the Senior Bowl. Pierce could do the same. Former Florida guys. James Cook from Georgia, Dalvin Cook's brother. A lot of people are predicting that he could have the best week of any player there. I think it's very possible. Could he have some resemblance to his brother's style of play? Yes. Jim Nagy even said, we could see him lined up at wide receiver quite a bit. So I think it's going to be really beneficial for him to go down. And then Hassan Haskins, you love the athleticism. He can hurdle guys with ease. He's a former high jump guy in track and field, but Haskins is somebody that he's a physical downhill runner that I love his style, and I hate comparing former Michigan players, but he kind of reminds you of like Karan Higdon a little bit, who went to the Texans, and I think Haskins is going to get an opportunity somewhere. Don't know where that's going to be. Does he make sense for a team like the Baltimore Ravens? Absolutely. I would think that's a great fit for him. Could he be a nice backup behind like Saquon Barkley? Yeah. So I don't know. There's a lot of options for Haskins, but I think there's actually some starter upside to him. Briefly on the wide receivers, and again, I'm not going in every position group. I will probably split this up with a little bit of the wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks. Get through the sexy players. Now get into the bulk of the players that I enjoy watching the most, like offensive line, defensive line, and other defensive players later this week, because there's a lot to break down here. But jumping into wide receivers, just a couple of quick ones. Calvin Austin, the third from Memphis, track and speed guy. My guy Damian Parson and I, we've talked highly of him since the summer. He's somebody that, just is, you put the ball in his hands, he's going to make plays every single time. He's somebody that I just recently evaluated. I really think there's an opportunity that this guy is a locked top 75 pick. I've looked around. I've seen some people believe he's a fourth rounder. I think if you do that, you're misusing him. When you look around the league, you see how, Patterson's being used in Atlanta. You look at, St. Brown being utilized in Detroit. You look at Deebo Samuel. These guys can play H-back, running back, slot receiver, X receiver, all over the place. I think Calvin Austin can kind of do the same, despite maybe being listed a little bit undersized because he's not the biggest receiver in the world, but he is definitely somebody worth watching and somebody, if you bring into your offense, he's an explosive playmaker. So I like Calvin Austin quite a bit. Next to that, Jahaan Dodson, Penn State. I think the best wide receiver at the Senior Bowl, hands down. I think he's just, from a route running perspective, he's just so fluid. He does a tremendous job catching away from his body. He wins at the catch point. Honestly, if Jameson Williams didn't come onto the scene, if Garrett Williams just wasn't as consistent as he was this year, and Drake London and Chris Olave. I mean, if this wide receiver group wasn't as deep as it is, Jahaan Dodson, I think, would be talked about a lot more as a first-round pick. I think he's probably a top 50 pick, a little bit more so, but he is just somebody that has got that true number one starter type of upside. He'll be taken maybe on the second day of the draft, just to speak for now, and everybody will look back and say, how did this guy not go in the first round? We could see 7-8 receivers go in the first round. We have no idea how this is going to shake out. Dotson could be one of those guys, though. Next, Jalen Tolbert, South Alabama. Let me just say, this guy played outfield back in high school, had some high school or college offers to play baseball, ended up going to South Alabama. Seemed like, football was definitely his thing. He could have went to Michigan State, could have went to Vanderbilt. He ends up going to South Alabama down the street. He's from Mobile, Alabama, and he ends up going down the road to South Alabama, and it worked out for him. I mean, this dude has some insane tracking ability. I mean, his quarterback, Jake Bentley, who, talk about a name. You want to talk about going back in time. Jake Bentley was at South Carolina back like when Jadeveon Clowney was playing there. That's what it feels like. That's how long ago it was. But he went to Utah and all over the place. But he ends up at South Alabama, and Jalen Tolbert has really benefited with some, I don't want to say great quarterback play, but good enough, and he's bailed his quarterback out of a lot of situations with this tracking ability that he has. I mean, he looks like a natural outfielder running vertically down the field and tracking the football. And he finds it and he plucks it out of the sky. So Jalen Tolbert, Jahaan Dotson, Calvin Austin, 3 receivers worth keeping tabs on. Don't get me wrong. I am very impressed with Khalil Shakir out of Boise State. Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati is fun to watch. Dontario Drummond out of Ole Miss is fun as well. Romeo Doubs out of Nevada is a vertical explosive threat, kind of a speedster. Is he Deshaun Jackson or is he Daz Newsome? I don't know what to think of him yet, but we'll figure that out. But beyond that, I mean, it's a deep wide receiver group in the draft period for 2022. This is a pretty good group overall, but those top 3 guys that I talked about are a lot of fun. We'll get into the other guys at another time because we have, an entire month until the Senior Bowl, and trust me, it's going to be Senior Bowl heavy between now and then. Moving to my favorite group position to watch outside of offensive line, tight ends. Isaiah Likely, Coastal Carolina, leads the way here, and as much attention is going to be on the quarterbacks, this tight end group has got an opportunity to absolutely dominate, flourish, whatever you want to call it. They've got an opportunity to really dominate. And, like I said, Isaiah Likely out of Coastal Carolina, I talked about him in the summer as somebody that could emerge as the top tight end because he's just athletically gifted. He fits today's mold of NFL tight ends that can move all over the place. When we look back at Evan Ingram when he came out of Ole Miss, he, was very athletic, could play in the slot, could be, as an X receiver, could play in line. Likely's the same thing here, and just he's fast. He's athletic, and he's somebody that can move after the catch. So Isaiah Likely, Coastal Carolina, could really show out, have a really good week, especially if the inline blocking drills in one-on-one situations really come into play, and he has a good week there. I think it could be really beneficial for him. Trey McBride, Colorado State. Everybody you talk to loves this kid. Best tight end in the country. Very, very humble, very, very hardworking. Somebody that just gets after it and fits today's mold of NFL tight ends that wins physically, wins athletically. It can be a mismatch type of receiver at times. And I don't want to go down this road just yet because it could be very bad for me or it could be very good. But when you look at Trey McBride and you look just at size, 6'4", 260, you see what he can do. I can't help but think of one specific player playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, and that player is Travis Kelsey. He checked in at the at the 2013 NFL draft as a 3rd-round pick. At the combine, he was almost 6'5", 6'4", and 7/8, 255 pounds, ran a 4.61, had a 7.09 3-cone drill, a 35-inch vertical jump. I think Trey McBride can match those numbers. I genuinely do. and the senior tight end had a tremendous year this past year, had a tremendous career for Colorado State. And as much as I like Isaiah Likely, I love Trey McBride, and it's hard to find, just things that are wrong with him. I think when you watch today's NFL, the passing attacks that we see, the tight ends being used vertically up the field and underneath with like tight end screens and the stick routes and the quick passing game, Trey McBride fits that. And I genuinely believe when I look at him, there's the upside to be Travis Kelsey. Can he be? I have no idea. I mean, Travis Kelsey, through 15 weeks in the NFL, had almost 700 receiving yards or 700 receptions, had almost 9,000 receiving yards, had over 50 touchdowns. Can Trey McBride do that? No idea. I mean, honestly, I have no idea. And obviously, Kelsey is very beneficial in the fact that he plays with Patrick Mahomes, and he plays in an offense that is very focused on passing the football. But McBride had 86 receptions this year, over 1,000 yards. Surprisingly, 1 touchdown. I don't know what the hell that is, but you look at his tape and it's hard to find a flaw. And I mean, I go back a couple years ago, and I know it sounds crazy, like tight ends going in the first round, but if Brandon Pettigrew can go in the first round, explain to me why Trey McBride can't. You know what I mean? So very intrigued with him. Charlie Kohler, Iowa State. What's not to like with this dude? I mean, he's 6'8", 260. He's a machine. He does a tremendous job. I mean, just a huge wingspan, can catch away from his body. It's like, when you look at the Calvin Johnson graphic of like being a 2-car garage, that's what I think of when I look at Charlie Kohler. Not saying he's Calvin Johnson, but just being able to like catch away from his body and make some acrobatic catches along the sideline is impressive. I don't think Kohler is going to necessarily be the first tight end off the board because of the 2 guys above him, but he's going to compete with these guys. And if he has a great week and they likely struggles with blocking, or McBride struggles with drops or something, Kohler could come out and just prove his worth and be like, yeah, you can take a tight end in the second round. It's going to be me. I mean, if Drew Sample goes in the second round, Charlie Kohler can go in the second round, right? So Cole Turner, Nevada, the next one, just a tremendous red zone option. Somebody that when you watch him play, you're just like, man, it's no wonder to why Carson Strong was as good as he was. Obviously, Carson Strong had to deliver passes the way that he did, but 19 touchdowns over the last 2 years is not a fluke. Cole Turner, I think his best football is in front of him, and at 6'6", 240, if he can really prove that he can be that inline blocker, he can be really beneficial. But when you look around the league, there's a need for tight ends. There's teams out there that just they need that tight end that can make a difference. I think back to Carolina. I love the Ian Thomas pick. He hasn't become the receiver that I thought he could be. I love Tommy Treble, who's a tremendous blocker, but they don't necessarily have that weapon down in the red zone. Cole Turner for the Carolina Panthers, that would be, to me, a home run type of pick. But you look at, Trevor Lawrence. Can he succeed in the red zone? I don't know necessarily offhand what his red zone numbers are, but when you look at, Jacksonville, they could use a fire starter at tight end, somebody that can light a fire under Trevor Lawrence in that offense and be consistent down in the red zone. Cole Turner fits that. So we'll see. Jeremy Ruckert, Ohio State, just kind of that guy that does a little bit of everything. Not necessarily the elite athlete, the elite pass catcher, but the guy works his ass off. You have to respect it. He's a tremendous blocker when you watch him on split zone and you see that type of stuff. So I think he could be a solid 3rd or 4th round pick. I really do. It wouldn't surprise me if he ended up going in like the 5th round, but I think the 5 tight ends that I just talked about, we could see all 5 gone by round 4. I genuinely believe that. That sounds nuts, but I genuinely believe they are that good, and it's that good of a group. And it's sad because I'm not going to go into detail about, Daniel Bellinger out of San Diego State, who I haven't watched yet. Jake Ferguson out of Wisconsin. Outside of a couple of live games of watching Wisconsin, I haven't watched a ton of tape yet. And then there's Grant Caltera, who transferred from Oklahoma after retiring from the league, or from college football, goes to SMU, is kind of, rejuvenated his career a little bit. But there is a concern, a genuine concern about, hey, this guy, his injury concerns is very alarming. But again, a nice vertical threat. I think he's athletically gifted as far as being able to go down the field. 4 touchdowns this past year at SMU. It's nice to see him rejuvenate his career. I think he can definitely get drafted. I think he can definitely find, maybe a number 2, number 3 spot in the league, that type of role as a pass catcher. I'd like to see a little bit more as a blocker, and I think he can get there, but he's going to have a really, really strong week to really jump any of these guys. And really, I would say the same thing for Grant, Bellinger, or Ferguson. But, between Likely, McBride, Kohler, Turner, and Ruckert, wow, what a group. You got to get excited about them. And if you get excited about, the offensive linemen, the defensive linemen, that's fine. And I know everybody gets excited about quarterbacks, but you got to show some love to these tight ends because they're damn good. And I'm excited to see them up close and personal at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. So beyond that, I'm going to hold off on offensive line play because I'm going to go crazy talking about them. Defensive linemen, I'm going to go nuts. Linebackers, I'm going to go crazy. Defensive, just players in general. But I want to go into quarterbacks because I want to get it done with. I feel like every episode on this podcast I've talked about quarterbacks, and maybe it's because my team needs a quarterback because they've got Jared Goff. But beyond that, there's big news today. Sam Howell, junior quarterback out of North Carolina, accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl. He'll be there, and boy, oh boy, does this have the 2018 Senior Bowl feel of Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Kyle Oletta, stuff like that. And it was a great group. There was, first overall pick, Baker Mayfield on the field, crazy. Sam Howell, not saying he's going to go first overall, but he could be the first quarterback off the board. I kind of wrote him off a little bit earlier in the year, especially after that first game against Va-Tech. Shame on me. But I just kind of was at that point where it's like, I've seen some of his play go really south over the last couple of games that I've watched, and I think there's a lot of concern. He bounced back nicely. He had a strong showing. He's a physical runner as a quarterback for the mobility. There shouldn't be any concerns. The ball flies out of his hands, but he's got to get better at reading the field. He's got to get better going through his progressions. But if you put some weapons around him, I think he can be successful. Sam Howell could be, again, the first quarterback off the board when you look at it. Malik Willis, Liberty. Dude, get this guy an offensive line, please. Please. Nine sacks. He was sacked 9 times against Ole Miss, 6 times against Syracuse. And when you watch that Syracuse game, I think it's 8 clips of him making nice passes, bad passes, whatever, breaking down his game. But watching it, you'll look and you'll see this guy has no time to throw the football. Malik Willis, get him an offensive line. Put him, honestly, if Detroit with that second pick in the first round, if Malik Willis is their run to the podium, take him. If guys like Ritter, Pickett, stuff like that, if those guys are gone, take this guy. Even if they are there, take this guy. Because I genuinely think if you put some skill around him, he's going to succeed. He's too good of a runner in the red zone. He's too good of a passer because we talk about the ball flying out of his hand with Sam Howell, other quarterbacks. The same could be said about Malik Willis. When you look at what he can do really at all 3 levels, he can make all 3 throws. He's got to definitely throw with more touch. We've talked about that, Damien Parson and I. But Willis is fun. Willis should be in the conversation of the first round. Will he go? We'll see. If he has a good week at the Senior Bowl, I think he does. Desmond Ridder, Cincinnati. I've been in on this kid since 2 years ago when I was watching him on the sidelines with a towel over his head, an old telephone up to his ear, and a notepad in front of him as he's taking notes and talking to his coordinators. Love seeing that type of stuff. I think he had a really good year. I think when you look at zone read option type stuff for a quarterback, he does a really good job there. I think he delivers the football really well. I think he can, again, make some better decisions. I think he forces some passes at times, but Desmond Ridder, Cincinnati, somebody I really like. I would be surprised if he was available in the second round. I really would. Could he be the first quarterback? Potentially. We'll see. Kenny Pickett, Pittsburgh. Everybody's talking about him as QB1. Can't really disagree. Is the hand size a concern? I mean, he's got hands barely bigger than mine, and that's not saying much. Kenny Pickett, though, you just love what you've seen from him. He's been super consistent over his career, but then he just has this meteoric rise this past year, up in there for the Heisman. Doesn't win it, obviously, but he just had a tremendous year, and you have to love the deep ball throwing. His mobility is impressive, but I love the way he's able to create and extend plays and try to make some of those, I don't want to say daredevil throws because it's not like Patrick Mahomes, but he makes some impressive throws across his body on the run. Kenny Pickett, man, you got to love him, and he could be, honestly, the first QB. I mean, every name I just said there could be the first quarterback. The next two, I don't think will be the first two quarterbacks off the board. Certainly not the first quarterbacks off the board. Carson Strong, Nevada. I know a lot of people that love him. The knee has to be a concern. I mean, this dates back to his days at the high school level, and like I hate talking about it because I'm going and I'm showing maybe my age a little bit, but when you start thinking about quarterbacks with bad knees, who's the first quarterback you think of? For me, it's Jason White out of Oklahoma. So, like, I don't want to say like this guy's going to retire, but and he hasn't maybe had necessarily, as severe knee injuries as Jason White has had, but when you're hearing this stuff, you just have to think, is this guy going to be able to move around at the NFL level? I don't necessarily know, but I do like where he can place the ball deep down the field. I do like that he has the big arm. He looks the part, the prototypical size, and he's accurate with the football. He's completed almost 70% of his passes in his career. The last 2 years he has. He's had huge numbers. He doesn't turn the football over. So I think he makes good decisions. I think all these quarterbacks, I think, force throws. They try to make plays for their teams, and I respect that. But with Carson Strong, I think the knee can be concerning, and I think when you look at the other quarterbacks around that are in front of him that I've mentioned, they all have that mobility that just Strong doesn't, and I think that weighs in today's NFL. And I'm not saying you have to be, Lamar Jackson fast. You don't have to be necessarily Russell Wilson, but you have to be able to move around. And if Carson Strong can't do that, he's got to find, I think, the system, the scheme that fits for him. Maybe that's Detroit. Maybe just handing it off 25, 30, 35 times a game with 20 pass attempts is all they need. Maybe that's a great fit for him because, Detroit's a run-first offense. Maybe that's the fit. I don't know. So is there a chance Carson Strong goes in the first round? Absolutely. Absolutely. Would I take him in the first round? No, I wouldn't. But if you want that fifth-year option, it makes sense. And then last, Bailey Zapp, however you say his name, Western Kentucky. Haven't watched him in depth. I watched him live against Michigan State. The guy made some impressive throws. He is definitely somebody I'll watch before the Senior Bowl. But I think he's certainly a draftable kid. I just don't know, necessarily where you take him. Is it in the second round? Is it somewhere in the third or early fourth round where you try to, take this guy, snag him, and develop him? It's all very possible. We've seen crazier things happen. Obviously, teams make some wild decisions on draft day. But I think if you have a veteran quarterback where, like, for example, Matt Ryan, Atlanta, if they can't get out of that deal, maybe they don't want to spend a first-round pick on a quarterback because they're unsure of what Sam Howell is or whatever, and they feel confident in this kid in their offense. Maybe he's that second-round pick for them. Maybe he's that third-round pick if you can pick early enough. Is it maybe Pittsburgh who, while Big Ben's more than likely done, it certainly seems like he's done in Pittsburgh. It certainly seems like he's retiring. Again, crazier things have happened, but maybe they bring in a veteran quarterback like a Kirk Cousins or something where they bring in this veteran for a year or two, and then they bring in a Bailey Zappi, whatever, however you say his name, and you bring him in. Is it all possible? Yes. We'll see. But he's going to have a really strong week. Fortunately, there's some really good receivers there. Obviously, when you look at Carson Strong, his receiver, Romeo Doubs, will be there. So will that chemistry be renewed? Will they be on opposite teams? We'll see. But it's going to be a really fun week. We will get more into the receivers and running backs down the road. We will jump into offensive line, defensive line when we speak next time. We will talk more about the edge rushers and linebackers and so on and so forth. But the Senior Bowl roster reveal, really good stuff. And it's also just my favorite time of the year, right? We got playoff football coming. We got the draft, the draft is essentially here at this point. Players are declaring left and right. Players are going back. So we'll see. But one thing that we do need to touch quickly on, and I mentioned all these quarterbacks. I mentioned, the top there, Malik Willis, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, Kenny Pickett. All four of these guys could be first-round picks. There's another guy that's potentially a first-round pick that we haven't talked about, and that's Matt Carrell, Ole Miss. Plays in a pointless game, and I don't care what anybody says, plays in a pointless game against Baylor. It's not the college football playoff. It's just bragging rights. It's your pride, and I respect it. I love that the guy's going out competing with his brothers. I would do the same thing. I would 100% do the same thing. But I can assure you, he could be costing himself millions of dollars by playing in that game, which he might have already done because he ended up hurt. He was on crutches. Teams are now going to have to go through the whole medical evaluation part of that. But these teams are going to get firsthand looks at Sam Howell, Willis, etc. And Matt Carrell is going to be on the sidelines waiting until his pro day, combine, and if he opts not to throw, then we're really talking about, okay, what in the world's going on? Do I think he'll do that? No. But there is a concern with Matt Carrell because he is very sporadic with the football. His offense is so RPO heavy because you have to run that offense perfectly for it to work. You have to be able to build some consistency on the ground, and they've done a good job. He's done a phenomenal job with it. He did a tremendous job limiting the turnovers. Remember, 2 years ago, we've talked about it in the summer when he played Arkansas. He threw 6 interceptions. I think he threw 6 interceptions all year. Great job. But beyond that, Matt Carrell's got to be able to compete this offseason with these quarterbacks because he could be the 5th quarterback off the board compared to being potentially the first quarterback, which was very much a conversation when you look at teams like, the Washington football team, the Carolina Panthers, these teams that are in need of a offensive difference maker. And I think Matt Carrell can make a difference offensively, but he's got to be able to show that he's not just RPO reliant of a quarterback because when that overhang defender, that linebacker, they don't bite on that run play and he's preparing for that slant, can he get out of that situation in the NFL and find the alternate read? It's hard to say because when you watch him on film, there's so many times it's literally if you count to 3, he's going through the motions and delivering the slant or going through the motions and delivering the fly. There's so many times that you see that on tape. And as much as I get excited about RPOs and all that stuff like we all do, it's concerning from evaluating a quarterback when we do that. So you want to be able to see more. I love Matt Carrell. I would take him. But again, could this ankle injury be a big concern for teams? It very well could be. We'll see how it shakes up for him. We'll see how it all comes together. I'm praying that it all works out for him because you never want to root for a player to fail. But it's interesting. We have 4 potential, maybe even 5 if you add Carson Strong. 5 quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl could go in the first round, whether people want to believe it or not. And now you have Matt Carrell on the outside waiting in. Very interesting. But if you're a player and you're not playing for a national championship, you're not playing for the opportunity for that national championship, opt out of the bowl game. Unless you feel like, hey, playing in this game is going to help my stock. But make that business decision. Go and just get out. Get out of it and go enjoy the NFL. Go make those millions of dollars. But the coach side of me, the player side of me, the heart and soul side of me, I love seeing it. But from a business side, it just doesn't make sense. So I hope Matt Carrell, all the best. I hope it all works out for him. We'll see how it goes. The Senior Bowl, though, 3-4 weeks away. First week of February down in Mobile, Alabama. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm hoping to be down there. We'll see how it all goes. And I'm hoping I'm representing Cover 1 as we go through it and we get ready for the draft. So, honestly, I don't have anything else to really get into outside of, we'll do more Senior Bowl stuff later this week, either tomorrow or Thursday. I'll be looking maybe Saturday morning for a potential live show or maybe Saturday afternoon. It's hard to say. Maybe we'll watch a little NFL football because we got Saturday NFL football this weekend. Maybe we'll watch a little bit of that and maybe bet on some games, drink a few beers, talk some draft. We'll see how it goes. But until then, you guys, like I said, you need to go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, search the Cover 1 NFL Draft Podcast, subscribe to it. Download our episodes, listen back. Please drop me a rating, drop me a review, and who knows, maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll pick a couple of random reviews that I get between now and then. And if you submit more than one, that'll double your entry. And if I have enough of them, I'll pick a couple people to get that free premium subscription for an entire year. Maybe I'll get them some Cover 1 gear, the whole nine. We'll go over it later this week. But, of course, you guys can find me on Twitter at RussNFLDraft. And then, of course, like I said, the Cover 1 NFL Draft podcast, subscribe to it. But until next time, this is Cover 1, the NFL Draft podcast.